Well, hello, that's me again. Today is January 9th, and let me start with this. You see this wonderful picture? It's from a very famous Soviet and now Russian, actually. The franchise continues to live. A cartoon called The Adventures of the Leopold the Cat. And Leopold, as you can see yourself from this picture, is a really lovely cat which constantly fights two assholes, those mice, which create a lot of trouble for this cat. And this cartoon, which is called The Adventures of the Leopold the Cat, is famous for this very famous Leopold phrase or statement, if you wish, each time those mice created some trouble and he resolved it, and he tells them, guys, let's live in friendship. So Leopold the Cat in this particular case is basically Russia. I am not the first time into comparing Russia with all kinds of the cats, actually. And even I wrote about 5 years ago, probably, or 4 years ago, the piece which was called Russia as a Cat, after the famous fable by famous Russian 19th century fable writer Ivan Andreevich Krylov. And you can find it on the space of internet. It should be called Russia as a Cat under my name. So this is what happens, and Russia is indeed a Leopold which constantly tells guys, let's live in friendship. Obviously, it goes through all kinds of channels, but primarily through means of Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister of Russian Federation, and of course Maria Zakharova also does her job conveying this message. But obviously, they also, as in some episodes of this cartoon about very peaceful, very lovely Leopold the Cat, when he goes berserk. There were a couple of episodes when Leopold goes bananas. And then, of course, after that, he says, guys, let's live in peace. Let's live in friendship, or let's be friendly. So, and here is, we have to recall what Mr. Lavrov spoke about Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, in December, just recently, just before the new year and new 2023. And he stated that basically OSCE is non-workable organization because it's basically a bunch of the countries, obviously meaning United States and Poland and some Eastern European other enclaves such as Baltic states. They're trying to draw the lines between Eastern and Western Europe, and he's absolutely correct. But point is that OSCE, for all intents and purposes, as most of the Western-inspired institutions, be them political or financial or economic institutions, they are pretty much becoming defunct. And Russia is working like this, Russia as a Cat, and my famous, famous in some circles, piece, Russia is continuing to eat her chicken, or eats chicken if you wish. So, and the question here in this case is, why Russia is still in many of those organizations, which many people ask me all the time. Again, you do not break off all channels of communications. And many of those organizations, including OSCE, however corrupt and however perverted and however what have you, trying to be the basically court of Russia, there are still some kind of the basically communications channels or communications platforms. Do I like it? No, but I'm pretty sure even Mr. Lavrov doesn't like it. But you know what? Russia operates in the basically civilized manner here, and she basically uses all available channels. And if OSCE still has any kind of the capability to provide some kind of communication, this is important. And I have to go even further back. And this is the end of the 2021, when Mr. Putin went on a record, and actually he did it before, but he was very specific, that Russia will continue to work with the healthy forces in Europe. So, what are those healthy forces in Europe? Well, at this particular point of time, the only way we can call healthy forces in Europe are the ones which are not completely batshit crazy. And there are some people, there are some basically serious strata of the Western populations who are not completely brainwashed. And Russia, yes, Russia will continue to work with that. And one of the examples of this work is, of course, what? Hungary, or for that matter, Turkey. But look at this. Evidently, even people on the OSCE, or Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe, like her president, Helga Schmidt, today comes up and says, you know what, no matter what happens, we have to have Russia at our OSCE. Okay, that's fine. Sure, here's the direct direct translation of what she said. And obviously somebody in Europe begins to kind of scratch their head, trying to figure out what is going on. Well, what is going on is very simple, and we will I will be talking about this shortly, but let me start with this. Just for you to understand what is happening. This is Myśl Polska. It's a very popular news portal, if you wish, in Poland. And guess what they write about? They write about this tug of war which is happening right now between the members of the European Union, and of course about Annalena Baerbock saying that we cannot have the diversity of the opinions in European Union. And here it is. This is what Myśl Polska calls Koniec Czeszki Niepodleżności, which means basically the end of the Czech Republic independence. Because obviously even Poles understand that basically what is happening now, that Baerbock and the globalist elite of the European Union will be basically putting people, this rank and file of the European Union, into concentration camp for all intents and purposes, not allowing them to have any of their own interest on the international arena. And of course Annalena Baerbock, who nobody knows what kind of the vocational school she graduated from, but she thinks that she is the specialist in the international relations, which of course she is not. But this is what happens right now, and Europe is being pressed, obviously from the service of the United States, into utter submission, not just economically, and I'm talking about serious economic disaster which is unfolding right now, but obviously in terms of the foreign policy decisions. And even Poles begin to point out that, yeah, that's the end of Czech independence. Well, guess what? That's the end of anybody's independence. And the only independence you can have is to ask the United States, what should we do? And because of that, Europe has all those elites which are already placed in place, so to speak, to control it. And nothing could be done about it. And I understand when many Europeans complain that, oh, we never voted for that. Well, I'm sorry. Yes, I get it. But it is what it is, because in the end, still, people did vote. And when you look at Macron and you look on those actually batshit crazy people around in Europe, I mean, they were voted by populations, by the majority of population, and I don't buy all those, complete corruption of the electoral system. No, you still can vote, and you have to, if you have to win, you have to win with handily, handily. You have to win with the serious, basically, advantage. Macron won with a huge margin. And this is just one example. But why I'm saying this, and especially presenting to you all those OSCE and other things, and how it is not really working out for Europe. We'll have to start, in this particular case, in a purely military aspect from this. Mr. Reznikov, who is the, actually, for some reason, defense minister, he's a lawyer by education, so it's a proud tradition of the basically Western civilization now to put unqualified people in the posts of the defense minister. He stated just 3 days ago very nonchalantly, actually, today Ukraine is addressing the threat. Threat is being Russia. We are carrying out NATO mission today without shedding their blood. We shed our blood, so we expect them to provide weapons, he said. Reznikov also claimed that his NATO colleagues have told him both in conversations and via text messages that Ukraine is the shield of civilization and defending the entire civilized world, the entire West. And that brings us, which is, by the way, Reznikov in many respects is not lying here. There are many people, as I already stated, in the West, both in the United States and Western Europe, who consider Russians, all those, Asiatic hordes of the, subhumans who want to, basically get into Europe and rape all those, LGBT activists, and then, I don't know, eat McDonald's. I don't know. It's difficult to figure out the opinions and how those people think, but I think I have a clue. But the truth is, the Ukraine is indeed a shield, sort of, but more like a ram, let's put it this way, and it needs weapons. So United States, and namely Mr. Jake Sullivan, the obviously national security advisor to Mr. Biden, calls Italians and tells them to provide Ukraine with SAMPT air defense complex, which, as you can see yourself from here, unlike their Patriot, which was still, this saga with Patriot will continue for a while, because I can tell you immediately, the United States doesn't want to provide Patriot because it's going to be a complete reputational disaster, but they want the SAMPT from Italy, which is actually a decent air defense complex. It's actually built around the Aster family, in this particular case Aster 30 missile family, and it has the range of up to 120 kilometers and can shoot down aerodynamic and even ballistics, tactical operational ballistic targets for the altitudes of up to 25 kilometers. As you can see yourself, unlike, for example, Patriot, of which we hear so much, this carrier of the Aster 30 missiles actually has a vertical launch system, vertical launch containers, which provides, of course, a very serious advantage over Patriot. Well, and here we are. So Italy is having its hands twisted to deliver this to Ukraine. Obviously, if they will do this, it's not going to help in any way. It's going to be obliterated the same way as whatever United States tries to supply to Ukraine. But it is what it is. So now United States presses everybody in the NATO, European NATO allies, to supply all kinds of things. In fact, we already have this poodle, Macron. He's talking about supplying the wheeled tanks. Well, those are basically primarily recon machines with the 105mm gun, which will not do well on the even frozen black soils of Ukraine, but Macron, just jumped the red line and decided to supply some of those to Ukraine. And again, the same as Bradleys, which United States promised to Ukraine, they will be obliterated, and that will be interesting situation to see all those videos and photos of those basically annihilated NATO equipment. And here we are. Why so much suddenly, how to say it, hustle or movement around this whole weapon supply situation? The explanation and the reason for this is very simple. As Newsweek told us just recently, namely 2 days ago, Putin's war plan reaching critical moments, Ukraine ambassador. Yeah, we know that there are very few normal people in the American or Western press or media left, and especially Newsweek, which is neocon's neocon magazine. And so here it is. And now they come up with this idea that Putin floats an insincere peace offering as the Kremlin looks to ease pressure on its beleaguered forces occupying swath of Ukraine south and east. Okay, sure, yeah, it's beleaguered forces. Of course, those beleaguered forces have the kill ratio right now more than 1 to 10, and you can obviously look to at the latest of Colonel McGregor, who is very well connected in Pentagon, and him talking to Judge Napolitano a few days ago, and he stated that basically our estimates are this: 150,000 killed in Ukraine, 450,000 other casualties. So these are horrifying numbers, basically, and this is even so, it contradicts in the same Newsweek article when Mr. Ambassador states this, and read what he says. We have been in the war for almost a year now. Pristaiko, that's the name of the ambassador, said, we're losing people left and right. We're not advertising how many of those lost are military or civilians, but you can imagine that numbers are huge, indigestible. And the cities, some of them are totally destroyed. Well, of course, here, that's complete bullshit that some cities are destroyed. And actually, the number of the civilian victims, sadly, they are there, but they are not huge, as much as cynical as it sounds. And so when you even take into account what McGregor says, yeah, even this guy basically admits that we're losing, yeah, they lost the whole army. And obviously when you begin to look at it, how our Russians are beleaguered if they continue this slaughter, and especially around Bakhmut, which is Artyomovsk, and Solidar is practically, they fight now in the middle, in the center of the city, probably already not even in the center, probably already Solidar was mostly, I'm not saying 100% taken. So I don't know, well, they live in this world of delusion or illusion, and yet they still admit that, yeah, we have our ass handed to us by those beleaguered Russians. Well, the explanation is simple. They need badly this equipment, which still will not change any kind of outcome, and their key, so to speak, their hint on this is obviously from this piece from 2 days ago, written by no less heavyweights than Condoleezza Rice and Robert Gates, and you obviously don't need the basically introduction of those people, especially Robert Gates, who throughout his career have been both CIA director, he was the basically Secretary of the State, and he was actually the Secretary of Defense, including partial time his tenure was in Obama administration too. And so they write this article, which everybody now discusses, as the signal, as the hint that United States itself is bleeding. And obviously the title of this article, Time is not on Ukraine's side, speaks it, I mean, loudly. Obviously, they come up again with all kinds of bullshit in this article too, as most you would expect, like that they talk about Putin, that he believes it is his historical destiny, his messianic mission to reestablish the Russian Empire, and as Zbigniew Brzezinski observed years ago, there can be no Russian Empire without Ukraine. This phrase alone shows to what degree ignorant both Bates and Rice are, because actually Russians didn't want Ukraine to start with. But you know what, if they consider this mediocre Polish fanatic Brzezinski, who is academically was the second rate and intellectually as somebody who can predict anything about Russia, well, what do you know? I mean, you can take a look at the state United States finds itself today, and that explains it all. But suddenly they say that, yeah, both of us dealt with Putin on a number of occasions, and we are convinced that he believes time is on his side, that we can wear down the Ukrainians, and that the youth and European unity and support for Ukraine will eventually erode and fracture. To be sure, the Russian economy and people will suffer as their war continues, but Russians have endured far worse. Well, at least they admit that, and of course Robert Gates and Condoleezza Rice, the fact that they dealt with Putin by no means tells you that they are good in the basically judging the character, despite the fact that of Mr. Gates being the former CIA guy and obviously having some instruments which were given to him in his CIA training on the farm of how to judge, judge the character and how to recruit people. That's the main basically basically professional trait of any kind of the intelligence service. So I don't think so he knows who Putin is, because as any graduate of the Russian and Soviet study field in the United States and has degree in history, I mean, he will know shit from Shinola when it comes to Russia. But even those guys, Rice and Gates, they admit that Russia does this deliberately slow, because actually what is happening, you know what, you already can see the fact that some, you know, those little birds like the basically president of OSCE try to maintain some kind of the contact, and when you look at the economic situation which is happening right now in Europe and even in the United States, you begin to understand that, yeah, you know, the strategy of Russians in this particular case is not that stupid. It is very deliberate. It is very slow on purpose. And now we have to say, again, I'm going back to basically Colonel McGregor, who insists that Russia will probably conduct some kind of the major strategic offensive actions comes this, you know, winter in full force, and the ground begins to freeze, which is beginning. We'll see. I'm not Cassandra, but I have other people whom I respect and who are not stupid by any stretch of imagination, who say that maybe not, that maybe Russia will continue to basically drag this out on purpose. And when you look attentively now that and of course, there were many, you know, very excited hamsters from YouTube channels, you know, all those military analysts from mama's basements, you know, who say, oh, now we have the, you know, NATO stock being delivered to Ukraine to fight Russians. Yeah, it was delivered for now, for many months. We already know that NATO air defense systems are failure, that pretty much artillery and anti-tank weapons are also failure. So yeah, it will be another failure. It doesn't matter what they do. It's just that those weapons haven't been created for the real war, especially under conditions which exist today in former Ukraine. But here we are. So they want to deliver those weapons because they have no other option. And when you begin to talk about the strategy, which is basically disclosed by Mr. Reznikov, that basically in the end it's NATO war against Russia, Russia was ready. Russia was ready. As my friend, and again, he is former senior officer, captain of the U.S. Navy, Naval War College, all that, Byron King, he used to say that, you know what, strategy is what? It's a correct lining of the resources for the purposes you want to achieve, or aims you want to achieve in the war. Russia is not fighting Ukraine, which Mr. Patrushev again admitted today. Russia is fighting NATO. And this will be about demilitarization of NATO. And if it takes basically creating the conditions that NATO basically begins to deliver its whatever they say, Bradleys, 50 Bradleys, they will make no difference whatsoever. Those Italian Aster complexes or Patriot complexes, NATO cannot supply Ukraine in quantities which will be required to have at least some kind of the operational success against Russia, because Russia have resources lined up and it was planned years ahead for this, specifically this war, which in the end comes down to not just demilitarization but denazification of NATO too. And we know that there are many Nazis, not in the name, but in practice, among people in the United States and European Union. And they hate those Russian Untermensch. So, and they would love to see Russia being, you know, basically destroyed and then have the last breath of air before they collapse into obscurity of having their hands on Russia's immense resources and now immense technologies. So there you go. That's the war. And Russia have been prepared for this war for a long time. And even Rice and Gates, they admit that Russians endured much worse. And fact is, if you look at Russia today, I don't know, just look up Anya's, you know, videos. Russian stores are filled. Russians are doing okay. So their problem with the you know, automobile traffic, because evidently Russians are so poor, the traffic jams everywhere in every Russian city because of the enormous amount of the cars and things of this nature. So it's not as bad as they try to portray, but this is about Russia fighting NATO. And remember again that this ultimatum in December 2000, well, actually November 2021, which was given by Russia to NATO, and about the borders to 1997. Is it possible that Russia can achieve this aim? I think so, it's possible. And I can tell you another thing, and if you look attentively, even at the Bloomberg yesterday, okay, we have this guy who have no clue what he's writing about. This is Andreas Kluth here. For some reason, I don't know, the guy gets the degree in political science, and he decides that he can write something about strategy. They don't know what strategy is. That practically any, basically, Western journalist and many Russian journalists, they have no clue what it is and how it is basically formulated. But he talks about thanks for the tanks, but send the Abrams and Leopard too. And I can tell you already that the West has faced a conundrum. How do you support Ukraine in its heroic self-defense without tripping over Putin's red lines and ending up with Russia and NATO shooting at each other directly? Put differently, how do you help Ukraine win without starting World War III? I have an answer for this Mr. Kluth, who obviously has no clue and writes about strategy from the ancient times, from Carthage, I believe. So that's the book he wrote about it. Oh, so applicable to today's war. I'm just being facetious, of course. There is no way you can help Ukraine without starting World War III with Russia. That's the problem for the West. And this is the thing which they never thought through. And as I already stated, American and Western elites are not qualified to think it through. And now they find themselves in this tunnel. And they run to the end of the tunnel, and what they see there is the light. And this is the light of the approaching train, not the exit from this tunnel. And there is no other options. So they have to either start the World War III, and we know where it all goes, or they can start shipping and supplying Ukraine with whatever they have. And it won't change the outcome. It will prolong it. It will prolong misery for most Ukrainians, but it will also prolong misery for Europe, and eventually it will be the misery in the United States. But I am on the record, and I'm writing the 4th book about this. There is an issue with understanding modern war in the combined West, and many people, majority in fact of elites, they do not understand what the real war is. And this is what I wanted to tell you today, and take it any way you want, but it's kind of a C-trap, if you wish. But do not forget, Russia, as that cat, the Leopold, or Leopold the cat, rather, Russia always says, let's live friendly, let's live in friendship. Well, evidently those appeals haven't been heard. Well, somebody begins to understand that it's too late. And this is what was my talk today for you guys. So as always, those who like what I do, please support me on Patreon or buy me coffee, and subscribe to my channel. And it is thanks to my patrons, and your support, guys, that I'm able to do what I'm doing. And thank you very much for your support. And I'll be talking to you later. Have a nice week. Bye-bye.